watching NRATV with Bill Whittle.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Hot Mike Show live from Los Angeles. I'm Bill Whittle, and disappointing news today. Hot Mike is not going to be able to be with us this afternoon. Here's what happened. First, he tugged on Superman's cape. Then he spit into the wind. Then he pulled the mask off that old Lone Ranger. And finally, he messed around with Jim. So we don't expect him back till Monday at the earliest, I think, at this point. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Today we celebrate the People's March, the Citizens' March. We talked about the Women's March last week. Today we're going to talk about the Citizens' March against the evil of fake news. It's actually happening, and we're going to be talking with the person who's organizing this event. Before, I think the first time I remember hearing the term fake news was probably 2 or 3 days after the election, when they finally were able to trot Hillary Clinton out from her crying fit and probable drinking fit and all the rest of it, and dragged her out there to give her concession speech 2 or 3 days late. It's the first time I remember hearing about fake news, because I remember Hillary Clinton basically saying, "We lost the election because of fake news." Why don't we return to those thrilling days of yesteryear and just pick up a little bit of that scent where at least I remember it starting?
The epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda that flooded social media over the past year. It's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences.
If we are not serious about facts and what's true and what's not, then we have problems.
Fake news that popped up on social media during the election season and may have influenced some voters.
A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
You know, Hillary, and Barack as well, you've got to be careful, because you have unleashed the Kraken. The Kraken is now wandering around, and now everybody's using the term fake news. I bet you that when you thought you'd be able to discredit Donald Trump and all the people that voted for him by blaming your loss on fake news. And by the way, it's precious, isn't it, listening to Barack Obama lecturing us on concern for truth and the facts? That's enough to require some Alka-Seltzer. But unfortunately, Hillary, instead of taking responsibility for the election loss, which was probably the most winnable election in the 21st century, but we haven't had too many. It was the biggest potential win in a long time, and just utterly blew it. Instead of blaming yourself where the blame belonged, you decided to invoke the Russians and this idea of fake news, and the term stuck. But unfortunately, the term has not just stuck, it's boomeranged, and it's come back to the point now where it's not the so-called fake news outlets that you were trying to indict, like Drudge Report and Breitbart and all the rest. Fake news is being applied to the mainstream media, and in particular, it's being applied to CNN. And there's a perfectly good reason for that. Can we see if we can figure out what it is? I think it's because CNN is the purveyor of fake news. That's my steady take on it. And this was a charge and a countercharge, and back and forth we go in the culture wars, my opinion, your opinion, everybody's opinion. And then our friend James O'Keefe from Project Veritas did something that took it out of the realm of opinion and took it into the realm of fact. He put undercover people in CNN and revealed to the world that CNN knew that the Russian connection is fake news and ran the story anyway. We were very fortunate to have James O'Keefe as a guest here on the Hot Mike Show a couple weeks ago. Listen to what he had to say about that from just a short time ago.
The main problem is that these media do not want people to actually have the raw information, because they can't trust the people with the information. If people are given the truth, which they have just been given, by the way, if they look at the tape, it's naked. I like to use this metaphor. It's naked in its honesty. This guy is not a bad guy. He's like you or me. He's just saying the whole system is broken. CNN's crooked. He says that it's a witch hunt. He's saying the stuff that a normal citizen Joe would say. And what my point is that they can't have people have that information because it ruins their narrative. information, raw information, if people see it, it ruins their ability to create the narrative. The media literally has to stop information from getting to people in order to advance their political agenda. So when the people are given the information, they're like, well, this changes my perspective on society. I don't believe the same things I believed 5 minutes ago after watching this video. The media can't have that.
Folks, that boy's one of the greatest Americans who ever lived. He really, truly is. So there's going to be a march against CNN. And what I like most about this is that we are finally, after 50 or 60 years of just taking an unrelenting pummeling at the hands of the left and their tactics, we're finally starting to use some of the left's tactics against the left. And what we found out is that they don't like it very much. One of those tactics was, of course, put out in sort of the progressive Bible, which is called Rules for Radicals, written by a guy named Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky was a mentor to Barack Obama, not personally, but Obama took pretty much everything he knows about community organizing, which we just call agitating, from Saul Alinsky. Hillary Clinton wrote her thesis on Saul Alinsky. And Saul Alinsky basically said, here's how you destroy the United States of America. And he used a bunch of rules, hold them accountable to their own rules and so on. But one of them that he used was freeze the target, personalize it. Don't make it about some general thing like the press. Personalize it. Make it stick to an individual or an individual entity. And that is what has happened to CNN. So we are very, very glad today to be able to bring to you our friend Bryan Crabtree. Bryan's a publisher of Talk40.com. He's a contributor to Town Hall, Daily Caller, and others. And Bryan is the organizer of this march against CNN. Bryan, when, where, and how many?
Well, it's Saturday at noon at the CNN World Headquarters in downtown Atlanta. It's going to be in Centennial Park. This is well arranged. There's going to be bottles of water, porta potties, the whole bit. So it's going to be just like the Women's March on Washington, except I don't think we're paying anyone to show up, so there won't be as many fake people protesting fake news as there was for the president's inauguration. That said, the Tea Party Project in Atlanta, Tea Party Patriots have signed up. You've also got the group that ultimately decided to spearhead this, and I joined the Stop the Scalpings group, who has been defending people like Sean Hannity and others that leftist groups have been trying to bring down, get fired off of Fox News, their radio shows, boycotting their advertisers. They are asked, your viewers can actually go to their Facebook page, Stop the Scalpings. They can upload a video if they can't be in Atlanta at noon on Saturday. And that video may show on the big screen that we're going to point right at CNN. Now, rest assured, CNN will not notice the real news about real people outside of their fake news bureau in Atlanta, their world headquarters. They probably won't even mention it, but they will be inside seething. And that's what we want, because also part of the agenda of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals is to get your opponent on their heels walking on eggshells. And that's what we want to do to CNN, because they deserve it.
Bryan, you're a genius. You're a genius, my lad. Yes, seething, that's exactly what we want. Seething is what we want, because when people start seething, they start doing things irrationally, and they really start to make mistakes. And in order to get people seething, you have to get under their skin. The NRA had our annual meeting in Atlanta a couple months ago. That's as close as I want to get to CNN, by the way. It was just across the hallway of what used to be the Omni. But they were seething then, and they're seething now. And a good example, I think, of what you just mentioned, Bryan, is a good example of how an organization, not just an individual, but an entire organization can just kind of go barking mad, just go raving, barking mad, was right after O'Keefe's, video proof that they were peddling fake news. The story is the most disturbing thing I think I've heard in the 12 years I've been doing commentary. Somebody put up a little GIF, a little image sequence of Donald Trump at a wrestling event from several years ago, and they had the CNN logo over the face of the guy, and Donald Trump basically threw him to the ground and came out, victorious. There are thousands of these things on the internet, and there are tens of them made every single day. CNN tracked down the person that made this. Turns out they got the wrong guy. Imagine my shock, Bryan. But they made this guy write a groveling apology, and then CNN issued the most fascistic, totalitarian horrible thing I've ever seen in my life, where they basically said, we found the person who made this video criticizing CNN. He's issued a sincere apology. We've decided not to release his personal information at this time and spare his life. However, if he continues with this hateful criticism of this organization, then we will do so in the future, and so on. That was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. And that was because they were seething.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. What a great story. That's a great analogy to all of this. CNN thinks through their arrogance, their elitism, that they are the cultural police. Every time there's a school shooting, they go after our guns. They think that they know better than the rest of us. They're just like liberal leftist politicians. They go on television and they spew and vomit all of their hatred and all of their arrogance, and they're really detached from what's really happening in the country. They're talking to regular people in the country, people that are kind of politically lost. People on MSNBC, they're leftists, they're liberals. People on Fox News, they're conservatives, they're patriots, those that are watching that. But you've got this player in the middle, CNN. They're really not in the middle. They're further left than MSNBC, in fact, in my belief. And they are there in their belief to make people do what's right. And by the way, it's what they think is right. Less guns. They think everybody's a racist and a bigot, the white privilege conversation. They think Donald Trump is a fascist, and yet they do things like you just described. These people at CNN it's kind of a two-part problem. Number one, you've got the anchors like Chris Cuomo, a guy that came out last year when the WikiLeaks dump was happening and said, you American citizens, if you go to WikiLeaks and download John Podesta's emails, that's a crime and you go to jail. Only we can do it. That's an arrogance and a dismissiveness to their viewers. But on the other hand, you've got these 20-something-year-old NYU, Hofstra University, Columbia University graduates who think because they graduated with a $250,000 student loan debt from a high-end leftist journalism institution, indoctrinated to leftist agenda, that they somehow know how to write headlines and know how to write script. And then these talking bobbleheads on television, they read the script without thinking about it, and then they emotionally vomit on the American people a fake news reaction. That's what's happening at CNN, and it's disgusting, and it's completely destroyed what used to be literally, I think, the most trusted name in news. Now, I'd say it's the least trusted name in news.
Permit me a small moment of personal interjection, but dude, that was just awesome. That was just awesome. That was absolutely fantastic. That's exactly right. That's exactly it in a nutshell. They are the cultural police. That's what James O'Keefe just said a moment ago in that clip that we played. These people, in order to foster their own sense of intellectual and especially moral superiority, it's unearned moral superiority, consider themselves the cultural police. And so they will make a decision as to what news the American people get and don't get. That decision will be based on what they think is good for the country. And it's all predicated on the idea that Americans in general and conservatives in particular are murdering racist savages who, if they're given the slightest bit of information, will simply run out into the street and start beating innocent Muslims and black people to death with tire irons. That's why they can't be told the truth, because the American people can't be trusted with the truth. That is the arrogance that we're dealing with here, and that's why these people are self-destructing. That's why they're going out of business. One of the terms we've been using here at the NRA lately, Brian, I don't know if Grant coined it, but a lot of people have been using it lately, and it's a good term too. It's the violent left. Are you concerned at all about your safety going up there in Atlanta outside of, the dark tower of Sauron there with a big giant red eye over the top? Are you concerned about your own personal safety or the safety of any of your marchers?
Well, we hear there'll be pro-fake news protesters, in other words, leftists out there protesting our protests. So, yeah, I talked to my wife about this morning. I am a concealed carry guy, and I can't get on MARTA because it's a gun-free zone with my gun, as I understand it, which drops me off straight from where I live in Buckhead right down to the CNN Center. So I'm probably going to drive. I'm probably going to pack heat just in case someone tries to attack. I don't know what else to do. I'm an NRA guy. I carry my card. I carry my concealed carry permit, and, I want to be safe. So if I see something going awry, I'll try to get out of the way. But generally in Atlanta, knock on wood, protests are managed well. This has been, the police have been notified. We hope everything goes well. Certainly there is no induction of violence or any inference of anything violent. It's simple words, almost with a permit in Centennial Park. by a well-organized demonstration this weekend. Hopefully we have a few hundred. A couple of thousand would be a massive win, but a few hundred would be great, to simply point out we want you to get to the facts and stop deciding what American people want to hear or what they need to hear, and give them everything and let them choose. That's what we have to do. We have to keep the pressure on these outlets like CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Times, to stay in the lane of the truth. And if we have to put ourselves in just a little bit of harm's way, I will say we have some fine police in Atlanta, and I think they'll keep things orderly. So I'm a little concerned, but not very much.
You know what the best thing, in my opinion, honestly, the best thing about being a conservative is, as opposed to being a progressive, is if you're a conservative, you get to say one thing and then do the same thing. You don't have to be living this constant game of saying one thing and doing something else. So basically, American patriots who are against fake news, who are going to be going down there, are going to be using weapons for their most personal security, which is what we're in favor in. And I find it ironic that the Women's March that happened just a few days ago, which was an anti-gun march, also had weapons there for their personal security. It's kind of nice to be able to say one thing and then do the same thing, and be able to face yourself in the morning and realize that what I say and what I do are pretty much the same thing. Bryan, you really got this down. You really seem to have the details down. Would you take a little advice from somebody who's kind of been doing this messaging thing for a while here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I think you should really emphasize how racist CNN is. I really think you should concentrate on that. And what I mean by that is this. First of all, it'd be nice to know what their editorial board looks like. It'd be nice to know what their, their corporate board looks like. But here's what I mean by this. This racism slur has been applied to conservatives. Anybody who disagrees with the liberal has been a racist for 50 years now. A racist is a person winning an argument with a liberal. And my argument is, and I think it's an extraordinarily defendable argument, is pretty simple. CNN shades the news, suppresses the news, exaggerates the news, and fakes the news in order to promote the liberal progressive agenda. If you look at the big murder pits in the country, if you look where people are being killed, 6 or 7 people a week, sometimes on a weekend, you end up with places like Chicago, Newark, St. Louis, Detroit, and so on. And all of these cities, all of them, have had uninterrupted Democratic control of both the mayor and the city council for 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. So by slanting the news in order to promote the Democratic Party and progressivism, they are getting black people killed at an astonishing rate. And the proof is that when you take a big city with a big murder rate like New York City and you finally put a Republican in there, the murder rate gets cut in, I don't know what the actual number was, but just dramatically cut. Rudy Giuliani probably saved more black lives than any Black Lives organization is likely to do in the next 1,000 years.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think organizations like CNN are the biggest racist. I mean, listen, when something happens in the black community that could reflect negatively, or the Islamic community, they don't report on that. They run from it. They turn it off. You could have bombs going off in Europe and the West and our allies, even in our own country. And as quickly as they feel like they can get away from it, they do. Even the night, I remember the Manchester bombing at the Ariana Grande concert, CNN was talking about Trump-Russia collusion by 10:30 at night, that we didn't even know the details of what had happened, because they don't want to admit the problems that exist in other ethnicities, national origins, and religions. They will be first to run to the scene to report about Christians or gun owners or white people, and they will do nonstop wall-to-wall coverage. That in of itself is a form of racism, because it distorts and it divides. It creates a circumstance where instead of bringing people together by talking about the issues fairly and openly, it creates anger on one side. And if people are bigoted, they just become more bigoted watching stuff like that, because they realize that CNN doesn't cover anything fairly. It's certainly not balanced by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, I think that's part of the totality of fake news. And one quick point on this. A lot of people go, well, wait a minute, CNN's telling the truth. These stories are truthful. Mueller is investigating, so on and so forth. When you tell a piece of journalism to your viewers on a newscast, and then you quickly seg into conjecture as to what you think actually happened when there's no evidence yet, and you start making suggestions and guesses, it's a good idea to make that an opinion show, not a newscast. CNN tries to bill itself as the news cable network, the cable news network, And most of their coverage, I'd say 70, 80% of it, is commentators telling you what they think or what their gut tells them happened with absolutely no proof whatsoever. And their coverage is 93% negative against Donald Trump. It's not that bad, even if you don't like Trump. It's just not 93% negative.
That is a very profound observation, the idea that putting opinion next to news biases the news. The Russian filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein was a master of editing, and in the early days of the Soviet Union, they just didn't have any movie films, so they started cutting up other people's films, Western films, and so on. And Eisenstein very famously took a series of completely passive human faces, and then he would intercut pictures of food, and people would say, "Oh, the person's hungry," or he'd intercut a picture of children, said the person's lonely. And it was the same face. So yeah, it's the combination is very powerful. Real quick, Bryan, where can people find out about the march if they want to join you?
Go to Stop the Scalpings on Facebook. That's probably the best place. Post a video there if you want to say something to CNN. We might likely air it. Make it clean. We don't want to be violent. We don't want to be vicious. We just want to be high pressure. But Stop the Scalpings on Facebook is where I'd send you. And of course, you can tweet me or find out more as we go along. I'll tweet out photos and such at Bryan Crabtree on Twitter.
Bryan, thanks so much for joining us today. Good luck out there. That's Bryan Crabtree from Talk40.com, and looks like it's going to be a real interesting day. We're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to take a very quick look at what this fake news costs us in terms of a country.